Next on TOONDISE, it's an all-new episode of GameView. It's time for GameView, television and video game reviews. And now, Scott Thal.
Hey guys, welcome back to GameView. Now, tonight we have to go over a couple things that happened this past week in the news, specifically the Masuda situation, his response to Pokemon trainers worldwide. That did not go over well. In fact, it may have made things worse overall for Game Freak and the Pokemon Company. We also need to talk about the Nintendo Switch revisions, because more and more publications keep coming out with these leaks and these supposed rumors that within the next month or two we're gonna get a revised Switch, whether that's a mini or a pro, but it does look like we're getting something before September. And last but not least, Mario Tennis Aces, it's dead, Jim. That's right. The game has just released its final playable character, Dry Bowser. Kind of a shame, because this sort of points towards Camelot moving on to other things. I still think Tennis Aces has a lot of life in it, and it is arguably the best Mario Tennis game ever to have been created. So I do want to touch base on that and give you guys my thoughts. Before we get started though, as usual, if you guys enjoyed tonight's episode of GameView, make sure to give a thumbs up, hit that like button, it really helps out, subscribe to TOONDISE, and also click that bell icon for notifications, and that way whenever we upload a new episode, you will get notified right away. Now, before we get into the big topics of tonight, I do want to go over a couple quick things that we did learn over this past week, and we're going to start off with Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, there's a little bit of deja vu going on here, because a week ago, last Friday, I did talk about the game and the fact that we had just learned there would be DLC. Not really a surprise to anyone. I mean, we all thought that Intelligent Systems was gonna try to push out more content for this game, just like with other Fire Emblem entries. No surprise there. But over the past week, a couple things have happened. Now, first off, on the eShop, you can now preload the game if you want to. We are now 3 weeks away from release. But also, on the official eShop page, there was more information posted specifically about the DLC. So, if you guys have your Switch handy, and you just take a look at the eShop page here, you'll notice that there are 4 separate waves of DLC coming out. The first wave, I don't really know if you can call this a wave, it's just like a free costume, a free outfit. Apparently, you're going to be able to get Officers Academy outfits for female and male Byleth characters, and that'll be available day 1, so on launch, July 26th. This is where things get interesting, though, because Wave 2 includes additional battle maps, support items, and more stuff. That'll be released by the end of October. Wave 3 is planned to be released before the end of December, and this will include additional quests, costumes, and another free update for the game. And last but not least, Wave 4, this actually goes up until the end of April next year, 2020, and there will be new story content, new playable characters, and more. I mean, what can I say? This game, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, okay? I was so concerned with this game. The fact that Intelligent Systems delayed this twice, the fact that they're teaming up with Koei Tecmo in other words, they couldn't actually develop this game themselves. They needed help from another third-party company. The fact that we hadn't really gotten a whole lot of information on this game up until, I want to say, about a month or two ago. So I was really, really concerned that this was going to be one of those situations where there was a lot of hype for it, and then when the game came out, a lot of fans were going to be disappointed. But with what we've learned recently, the fact that apparently there will be some kind of online component, the fact that there is going to be DLC covering a wide variety of extra content going up until, I guess, 8-9 months from now. The fact that there's full voice acting in the game for the very first time in the Fire Emblem franchise. I am getting really excited for this. I think this is going to be a game that a lot of people are not expecting to be as good until they actually try it and they see how good the game really is and how much content and how much work and effort Intelligent Systems put in. So I'm getting really, really excited, and the fact that we're 3 weeks away, I can't wait. Let's just put that mildly. So anyways, that's all the stuff we learned on Fire Emblem. Moving on to one more quick topic of the night, Super Mario Maker 2. Apparently the game is selling extremely well. Some initial sales numbers came in from Famitsu in Japan, and it's already at the top of the list. I think this is going to be a huge game. I don't know if it'll sell as much as Smash Ultimate or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I do think that as we get into the Christmas season, November, December, I think you're going to see many people start to pick this up, possibly 2-3 million total worldwide, possibly even more. So, great job for Nintendo on getting this sequel out, but there is one piece of bad news to this. I was speaking to Roxy earlier tonight, and apparently the game does lag online. So if you are planning on competing cooperatively or competitively with up to 4 other people, just be aware the same situation with Nintendo Switch Online and other first-party games is still a part of Super Mario Maker 2. So, disappointing. I mean, again, kind of expected at this point with the whole Switch Online service by now, but just be aware of that. You may encounter some disappointment. Okay, a lot of disappointment with the online play, but what can you do? So, let's get into the main topics of tonight's show, and we're going to start off with, of course, the topic that doesn't seem like it'll ever go away, Pokémon Sword and Shield. So, 1 week ago, obviously, we talked about the whole situation, the fact that the official Treehouse video had almost reached 80,000 dislikes, and it was about an hour or two before last week's episode of GameView aired that we actually saw Masuda's response. So obviously I could not address it last week, unfortunately. A little late to the party, but better late than never. Now, for those of you who missed out on this, basically Masuda posted this message Friday, June 28th, on the Pokemon website. I've posted it here if you guys just want to read it again. Basically, what it says is, thank you to all of our fans for caring so deeply about Pokemon. Recently, I shared the news that some Pokemon cannot be transferred to Sword and Shield. I've read your comments and appreciate your love and passion. Just like all of you, we're also passionate about Pokemon, and each and every one of them is important to us. After so many years of developing the video games, this was a very difficult decision. I'd like to make one thing clear: even if a specific Pokemon is not available in Sword and Shield, that does not mean it will not appear in future games. The world of Pokemon continues to evolve. The Galar region offers new Pokemon to encounter, trainers to battle, and adventures to embark on. We're pouring our hearts into these games, and we hope you will look forward to joining us on this new journey. And supposedly that came from Junichi Masuda himself. And unfortunately, like I mentioned at the start of tonight's episode, that did not go off well at all. In fact, I question if things actually got worse, because first off, I really feel bad for Teresa, Terry, and Bill in the Treehouse video, because last week I said it almost hit 80k. Now we're over 80,000 dislikes. I mean, and I can only imagine this is just going to skyrocket as we get closer to the release of these games in November. But after reading this statement, I hate to say this, but Masuda, you're an idiot, okay? This statement did not address any concerns that fans had regarding Sword and Shield. Now, obviously, the main problem here is this looks just like typical PR spin. Masuda not really addressing the problem, just acknowledging it and saying, yeah, we know you're upset, we know that you want all the Pokemon in the games, but they're not going to be in the games, and there's nothing we can really do about it, and it sucks to be you. That's pretty much what you get out of this statement. There are ways that he could have addressed this better. He could have come out and said, yes, we understand your concerns. What we are planning to do is patch on the additional Pokemon later, months, a year after release. He could have said that. He could have said, well, it's too late for us to add additional content into Sword and Shield because we're dealing with a time crunch. These games have to be out in November. We can't delay them because of the anime, the merchandise, the trading card game. But when the next core games come out down the line, obviously at that point we've got all the models, we've got all the animations done for these Pokemon, so now we can just focus on adding the others. He could have said that. He could have done anything else except what he chose to do, which is just say the exact same thing that he said during the Treehouse presentation, which is that this is the way the games are, you won't be able to transfer all your Pokemon into them, it was a difficult decision, but this is what we're having to deal with, and that's the be-all and end-all. And I think Game Freak is missing the point here, because it's not just the issue of the Pokemon missing in the games. It's more so the fact that they're not addressing future games as well, right? Because I think this is very important. We don't know how many Pokemon are in Sword and Shield in total, but however many Pokemon there are, you have to keep in mind that if Game Freak has even a tiny iota of intelligence, what they would do is take all of the attack animations, all the Pokemon animations and sprites and assets that are in Sword and Shield, and just do a straight copy into whatever the next core game ends up being, whether it's the Diamond and Pearl remakes, whether it's another core game down the line, Generation 9. they should just do a straight copy and paste, and that way they don't need to redo all 500 or 600 some models all over again from scratch. And then they can focus on adding on the additional Pokemon, the additional animations that are missing in Sword and Shield. That seems the most logical thing to do, and I'm sure most of you guys would agree with me on that. But the fact that Masuda doesn't even acknowledge that, I mean, how do we know that, let's say, a couple of years from now, Gen 9 comes out, and it's the same situation again? Oh, yeah, it's still on the Switch, but we were only able to fit 400 Pokemon. I mean, come on. Masuda either needs to take a PR class, or he is just completely out of touch, and he just needs to get out of the building. I'm sorry. Maybe he's been doing this too long, and he doesn't care anymore. I did have this discussion with Roxy several months ago. In fact, I think we talked about this a couple times, even last year, when we were talking about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and all the glitches and bugs, and the fact that those games were just rushed out as a cash grab with the Pokeball Plus. But yeah, it really does seem like Game Freak, either they don't have enough resources or they don't care. And it sucks. It really does, because for a multi-billion-dollar franchise, they definitely don't treat Pokemon as a multi-billion-dollar franchise. What can I say? I mean, if I go any further, I would just be repeating the same things that I mentioned to you guys last week. So there's no sense in doing that. Very disappointing overall. I am curious if sales will be affected for these games. I really am. Here's the thing. I think that this is just my opinion, and you guys will have to let me know if I'm completely off base here. But I think, first off, there has to be at least 500 Pokemon in Sword and Shield. I mean, right now we've got 809 total, plus I'm guessing an extra 100 that'll be released for Gen 8. Anything under 500 Pokemon, outright, that just screams absolute laziness on Game Freak's part. 500, I think, is the bare minimum. It's still not the ideal situation, but if we can get at least 500 Pokemon into games, most Pokemon fans, most Pokemon trainers will probably look at that and say, okay, it's not all 900, but at least it's half. And then hopefully, if Game Freak, again, has any intelligence, the next core games they pump out, they'll just copy the sprites and animations and assets over, and then that way they can just pump out the other 400, and that way we'll have all of them in one set of games. But 500, I think, is the bare minimum. If we don't get 500 in Sword and Shield, if we get to November, people start data mining these games, they find out there are only 300, 350 Pokemon in total, there will be riots. I'm telling you. That would absolutely scream laziness, and that is just absolutely unacceptable on Game Freak's part, especially considering how many Pokemon and animations and attack animations they were able to throw in to the 3DS games, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, especially because the cartridge sizes are much less for the 3DS, and hardware-wise, the 3DS is inferior to the Switch, so we'll have to wait and see on that part. The second thing I do want to point out, though, because in terms of sales, we're getting sort of a 50-50 split here. We've got a lot of people saying that even with all the criticism, even with all of the negativity surrounding Sword and Shield, the fact of the matter is, it's still a core game. It's still Pokemon. So, about 50% of the fans right now are saying, well, Sword and Shield are still going to sell 10, 15 million copies, and because of that, this is why Game Freak doesn't care. I mean, you could see it right in Masuda's statement. He's basically banking on the fact that even with all this negativity, it's still the next mainline entry in the franchise. People are still going to buy it regardless. But then you have the other half of the fan base, which is basically saying, I'm not going to buy these games, or I'm going to buy them used, so Game Freak doesn't get as much profit out of selling these games. And I question how well they're going to do. Now, to give you a bit of a comparison, right? If we go back to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, there was an article posted by Nintendo Life. This is going back a couple months ago to the beginning of February 2019. But to give you a bit of a comparison, so the beginning of February, I want to say that's, almost 3 months after Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee came out. So within 3 months, the games sold about 1.85 million in Japan and about 10 million worldwide. Now, the worldwide number is impressive. The Japan number, not so much. If you can remember when the games first came out in November 2018, we had all these news articles released all over the internet. Oh, these games are such a success! They're selling millions upon millions of copies. And then we finally reached February, and the sales dived off a cliff. And I did mention this several months ago, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people wanted to cover this. I wonder why. But Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are currently among some of the worst selling Pokemon games of all time in Japan. Again, worldwide, obviously it's doing better. Still not as good as some of the other titles, but then again, I mean, if you look back to something like Black and White or Diamond and Pearl, those games were out on the 3DS. You could argue the 3DS had a larger install base, and obviously it's been out for a longer period of time. So it'll be interesting to see how the sales numbers move forward from here. But Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, they were claimed by Game Freak to be mainline games. Now, we all know they're not core games, despite what Game Freak and TPCI say. They're spin-offs, and you can fight me on this all day. Granted, the mechanics are closer to that of a core game than something like, I want to say, a Poke Park or Pokken Tournament, right? But that being the case, they did not sell well in Japan, and let's be realistic here, Japan is the home of Pokemon. So, yes, these games were spin-offs, but they did have some core mechanics included, and they did not sell well in Japan. I'm curious to find out how Sword and Shield do, because, again, I don't know if the negativity and the backlash is going to be high enough to actually put a dent in these sales numbers. If they sell worse than Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and I highly doubt that's going to happen, then I think Game Freak would take notice, and they would take a step back and sort of acknowledge the problems and the fact that they screwed up on this whole Pokemon home and Pokemon bank situation. Well, we'll see. Come November, I think we're probably looking at the same numbers as Let's Go. Again, I could be wrong. I'm just throwing this out there. But hopefully, at least Game Freak will learn their lesson, because 80,000 dislikes, that's not something to sneeze at, right? I mean, we're talking the same level of dislikes that Metroid Prime Federation Force got on YouTube. The same number of dislikes that the Nintendo Switch Online service got when that was first revealed, that all of a sudden you now have to pay for the same service you were getting absolutely free, and oh, by the way, it's just as bad as it was when it was free. So yeah, that's not good. The fact that the Treehouse video is now Nintendo's most disliked video, even beating the NSO video, even beating Federation Force, that has to say something. Okay, so moving on to our next topic of the night. Not something I want to spend a whole lot of time on, but I do want to address this idea of the Switch revisions. Again, these rumors have been going on for, I want to say, a year and a half now, but apparently it seems like someone has some inside information. Someone, either at a production factory, is leaking this stuff out, or maybe one of these anonymous employees. It does seem like the closer we get to September, the more information is coming out to signify that we are getting some kind of revision. The one that, again, makes the most sense, as a lot of people online, Arlo, Game Explain, John from Spawnwave, the revision that makes the most amount of sense right now is some kind of Switch Mini, especially with Sword and Shield coming out in November. It makes sense that Nintendo wants to get out a cheaper version of the Switch. Maybe price it at $199, get it under that $200 mark, and that way they can push a whole lot of new units. Hopefully, maybe bundle some of them with Sword and Shield. That seems to be the general consensus. But I'm still hoping that there's going to be some kind of pro model, because the biggest problem I have with the Switch is the battery life. I mentioned this last week. 95% of the time, my Switch is docked. I rarely take it out with me, but when I do take it out of the house, battery life is the biggest problem. I'm always using the car charger. It's a pain in the rear end, because whatever game I play, even if I turn off Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, I minimize the brightness, I turn off the sound, I do everything to minimize the battery consumption, and the dang thing still only lasts 3 hours. And it is frustrating, as you can believe. Compared to the 3DS that was lasting 9 hours, it's very disappointing. So I know a lot of you guys want like a better processor, a faster processor to fix some of the lag in the games, to load games faster, minimize load times. That's all fine and good for me, but I just want them to fix the battery life. It's just, it's absolutely horrible. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I would not mind trading in my Switch to get a Switch Pro if there was an extra 3 or 4 hours of battery life. I think that would definitely convince me to make the upgrade. The other thing too, I don't know if Nintendo is going to take this idea of the Switch Mini where you can't detach the Joy-Cons. It's sort of like an all-in-one system and controller combined. I know a couple of people have been throwing out that idea, where they could sort of cut costs by not having the detachable Joy-Cons. But then it sort of strikes me as it may cause confusion in the marketplace, right? I mean, you call it a Nintendo Switch Mini, but then you could have some of these people trying to fit it into, let's say, a regular-sized Switch dock, especially young kids, right? I mean, imagine if you already have a Switch, you have a dock connected to your TV, and then you buy this Switch Mini for, let's say, a 7-8-year-old kid, and he tries to put it in the dock, and maybe it causes some damage to the dock itself because it doesn't fit, and then they try to jam it in. So I'm still not 100% convinced that they're gonna take that route, just, you know, having sort of like a PlayStation Vita in a sense. I guess that's the best comparison I can make. But again, everything that I'm seeing, everything that a lot of people are seeing right now, it does point to some kind of announcement by Nintendo, either in July or in August, definitely before September hits. And we'll see what it is, whether it's a Switch Mini, a Switch Pro, both. But yeah, time is ticking down, and it looks like we are going to get something. And that brings us to our last topic of the night, and this is going to be a quick one. Mario Tennis Aces. I mentioned this at the start. It looks like the game is dying off. There was a huge player drop-off when Nintendo Switch Online first went live. You noticed that almost immediately. When you were playing the game, you were trying to match up with other people online for tournaments and online co-op competitions, and the wait times just skyrocketed. I mean, you could be waiting 10, 15, 20 minutes, and I'm not even talking about a doubles tournament where you're waiting for 3 other people, even just a singles tournament where you're waiting for 1 other person, right? The player base really did drop off when NSO launched, effectively forcing a paywall behind the game, right? Well, the player base did seem to increase a couple months later as of December and January, because it makes sense, right? I mean, Smash came out, and people were getting Nintendo Switch Online so they could play Smash. So now, of course, they can play Tennis Aces online again. So the player base did go up. It didn't skyrocket by any means, but it did go up a little bit. But here we are in July, and now it looks like the player base is dropping off again, and part of it is Camelot's fault, because it does look like there are no more updates planned for this game. We just got the final playable character released, Dry Bowser, and as far as we know, that's it. And it's really a shame because, like I mentioned, this is the best Mario Tennis game that has been created out of all the Mario Tennis games to date. And it has a lot of potential. I look at the character screen, I see still some room for more characters. I look at the possibilities for adding additional content into the game, whether that's additional tennis courts, additional options for customization, especially when it comes to the online mode, right? I mean, they could add different rackets. Maybe you could pick which racket you wanted to use in online competitions. Maybe some rackets have more damage, but they break easier. Other rackets have a higher level of durability. There's so much that Camelot can actually do to extend the life of this game, but unfortunately, at least right now, it looks like they're moving on. A year's worth of character updates was pretty much all they wanted to do, and yeah, it looks like they're moving on to the next project, whether that's Mario Golf or maybe creating a sequel to Tennis Aces. I think it's too soon for something like that, but Obviously, it looks like they're moving ahead into the future, and it sucks, because the player base is going to drop off, and it's a shame. It really is, because this game, you really don't understand how good this game is and how addictive this game is until you actually buy it and you start playing it. And story mode could be expanded, the online mode could be expanded, but it looks like Tennis Aces is just getting put to the wayside, I guess. And yeah, guess we'll be spending less time competing in online matches until eventually we get something else. But that's okay, because Fire Emblem's coming out in 3 weeks, and I am going to be spending a lot of time in Fire Emblem, so we're all good. That's it. That means we are out of time for tonight. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. If not, hit the dislike. Also, if you guys haven't already subscribed to TOONDISE, now would be a great time to do so. Hit that bell icon for notifications, and don't forget, we are on Discord, we are on Twitter at TOONDISE, and you can also check us out on our official website, toondice.com. Vote in our surveys, because we get our opinions from you guys on what series to air, what changes to make to our shows, and we love hearing from you, whether it's in the comments down below or on the website directly. I will be back next Friday night, 9/8 Central, right here on TOONDISE for another episode of GameView. Until then, I'm Scott. I will see you guys later.